Hello, my name is Timur, and this is my Socionic questionnaire. Question number 1. Introduce yourself, tell us a little about yourself. Where are you from, city, country, what do you do, etc. My name is Timur Protskiy. I live in Kaliningrad, Russia. I was born in Soviet Union. I grew up in Belarus and moved to Russia 10 years ago. According to my first education, I am interpreter. The second one is journalist. It is unfinished, incomplete. And my third education is psychology. I study and practice Socionics since 2006, and now I am head of Modern Psychology Center Archetype. My hobbies are music, politics, and history. Question number 2. Give the definition of the following terms, at least one sentence for each point. Order. Order is a set of artificially constructed principles which make something more reasonable, convenient, and predictable. Freedom is a state of any entity when this entity does not have any restrictions or has less restrictions than other similar entities. God is an essential element of any religious outlook. Human being is a creature, one of many other creatures living on this planet. It is the most dangerous and destructive creature towards our environment, and it is the only creature that can transform the environment to its own preferences, and which has the most significant impact on the environment, while other organisms on the planet live in harmony with each other and with their nature. Morality is a set of rules that can be observed in human communities. Initially, morality was constructed to reduce the level of violence and discomfort in socializing between people. But nowadays, morality becomes more and more an instrument for manipulations and obtaining personal profit in social situations. Morality is not stable. These rules are being constantly changed in various communities and cultures, and many people still live nowadays with morality from Middle Ages. Betrayal is a deliberate violation of agreements, which causes negative consequences for at least one of the participants of this agreement. Work is a purposeful effort for getting a certain result. Boring person is someone who irritates others with his uninteresting speeches, who does not know how to maintain a cheerful atmosphere, who spoils everyone's mood and has a lack of humor. This is someone who doesn't know how to be an interesting person. Question number 3. Describe any event you remembered well, a trip, vacation, concert, meeting with friends, etc. I'll describe an interesting event. It's a very important event to me that happened last year. I traveled to the concert of one of my favorite bands, Tool. It's an American progressive metal band. It took place in Krakow. It's a city in the south of Poland. I like Poland very much. I've traveled many times there, and I really love the band Tool, and it's been my dream to visit their concert since I started listening to this band in 2007. And it so happened that they finally released a new album after 13 years of silence. I really was happy to get to their concert. It took place in a huge venue. There were thousands of people. Everyone was excited. I felt like I'm dreaming. It was very unusual to listen to all these songs, which I know well, and to watch the band playing live. I've seen them numerous times on video, and they were like in front of me for the first time, and they were just like on the videos, so familiar to me at the same time. Krakow city is a very nice and pleasant. I feel very comfortable in Poland. The only challenge of this trip was the temperature of plus 30, 32. It was summer, and south of Poland it's too hot for me. I can't stand hot weather and prefer more mild climate. But in general, it was a great trip. I still can't believe that I was there and saw legendary Tool live. And I'm really happy that this concert happened before all this coronavirus pandemic started. And now all the musicians have to postpone and cancel their shows. Question number 4. What events of modern world disturb you most? Why? What do you think has to be done to fix the situation? One of the things that disturbs me very much is propaganda against Russia in Western media. All the major media like BBC, New York Times and many other are constantly blaming Russia in all the catastrophes and troubles in the world. For example, recently there was an article in New York Times that Mr. Putin has destroyed American medicine. American Democratic Party has been telling ridiculous tales that Russia elects president in the US using anonymous profiles in Facebook. I think that very soon they will tell that Mr. Putin has created coronavirus to kill Americans and American democracy, or something like that. That sounds pathetic and idiotic, but there are many people who really believe that. The only way to counteract this is to create alternative media which would tell more about actual situation in Russia and in Western countries, and expose Western media fake news about Russia. So the only way to overcome propaganda is to convey alternative point of view without censorship, so that people could make their choice. What values do you think should be promoted in society? In my opinion, it is necessary to promote the attitude that people are the masters of their own fate, and they must take responsibility for their own lives. This means that no one is obliged to come and to solve all your problems, and no one is obliged to be pleasant and convenient for you. You need to solve your problems on your own and not complain about your life. What trends in society of your country do you see? In our country there are a lot of people who are dissatisfied with the government. Some people want to overthrow the government by whining on the internet. Others are waiting for their communism. On the other hand, our country has probably one of the most professional governments in its history. Russia's economy has grown quite strong over the past few years, despite sanctions, unstable oil prices and Russophobic hysteria. Many people demand more and more from the government, but it is always not enough for them. It seems that our people will never be satisfied. Perhaps it is human nature to be a perpetually dissatisfied fool. Question number 7. How do you feel about the fact that the borders of various states continue changing in the modern world through wars and revolutions? Are these methods justified in your opinion? All the countries that we are living in now had been conquered once. Almost every border is marked as a result of war conflict. 100 years ago, the number of states on the world map was much smaller than it is now. Borders are constantly changing because the world does not stand still. I live in a city that only 80 years ago was the capital of the state East Prussia, but now this state does not exist. You can't say, guys, let's leave everything as it is. There will always arise people and circumstances that lead to creation of new countries through separation or unification. International law has long been shown to be ineffective, so stronger countries will always act on their own, and weak countries can only express their concerns and regrets about this. You can only consider some territory as your own if you can control it and protect. If a territory splits off from the state, it means that the government has failed in its duties. The Soviet Union collapsed 30 years ago and lost its territories because the socialist system was ineffective. So changing borders is a normal process for human history. Question number 8. Tell us about the people around you. How can they be characterized? I try to be surrounded by intelligent and pleasant people. Those who don't try to dump their problems or negative emotions on me, who have high intelligence, a sense of humor and unusual interests. I like people who solve their own problems and never complain, don't try to adapt to anyone, and have enough courage to present themselves to this world. I like those who are able to think independently, who have something in their head other than banal stereotypes. I also don't have close contact with people whose political views are very different from mine. Question number 9. Do you have the inner circle people? How it is formed? What kind of people get to your circle? My inner circle is very narrow. It has less than 5 people, and I closely socialize with only one of them. I have some friends in other cities and countries, and we communicate several times a year. But they are not in my inner circle. My job involves a lot of communication, so I don't have time for any other kinds of communication, unfortunately. I feel pretty okay without a lot of social connections. Question number 10. Have you ever had real friends? Tell us about them. What kind of person do you call a real friend? Of course I had and still have real friends. This must be the person described in the answer to the question 8. I don't keep in touch with most of my friends because we all went to different cities and countries. Now we all have our own lives and families and completely different activities and interests. Friendship is good when people resonate with each other. It shall come mutually and without any effort. But people change, and not every friendship shall be maintained by all means just because you once were friends, if now you have nothing in common. Briefly tell us about your outlook and your personal philosophy. Where did it come from? How has it been formed? What has been changed in it over the past 10 years? My personal philosophy can be briefly described as a symbiosis of political realism, pragmatism, and capitalism. My favorite philosopher is Arthur Schopenhauer, and also I like some ideas of Friedrich Nietzsche. My outlook hasn't dramatically changed over the past 10 years. The only thing is that with every year I am becoming less optimistic about human beings as biological species. Question number 12. In your opinion, what is the key to successful performance, if it is? A scientific report. Clear and distinct speech of the speaker. Eye contact with the audience. A deep understanding of the topic of the report. The ability to convey complex things in simple words. The absence of unnecessary details. The ability to highlight the main ideas. If possible, to provide some illustrations for clarity. Ability to answer questions, including critical ones. Point B, a performance by the musician. The ability to work with the audience. The artist must see what mood the audience is in to behave appropriately. Performance skills, good vocal skills. The artist must be bright and unusual. He should be interesting to look at, or at least his music shall be bright and memorable. Question number 13. What skills or qualities you've been brought up by your parents? What are the most important skills or qualities are necessary for children, in your opinion? My parents are ordinary Soviet people. My father is a military officer and my mother is an engineer. So they tried to show me values and principles that were useless in my reality. I believe that most of the important attributes of a person are given from birth. Other qualities are trained in the course of life. As for children, in my opinion, the most important task of parents is to make sure that children become independent individuals as soon as possible, realize their peculiarities, and find their own way to self-realization. The sooner a child understands the rules of the game in the adult world, the better he will adapt. School most often prepares children for non-existent reality, and then they have to comprehend everything from scratch and face the harsh reality that their parents saved them from. I'm extremely skeptical about the traditional education system because it has almost nothing to do with what a person will achieve in life. Question 14. If you were in an unfriendly group, what would be your actions? What do you think may be the reason for this attitude towards you? I will try to reduce communication with an unfriendly team to a minimum. Most likely I will have at least a couple of supporters in this team, and I will try to change the situation over time. If necessary, I will talk to the group leader in front of everyone. If this does not help, I will leave the team if staying there is not important enough for me to tolerate such an uncomfortable attitude. Question 15. How do you define, is it a close person to you or not? In what cases do you stop communicating with a person you considered close? If I have the same basic views with a person, if they fit my criteria of adequate people, which I mentioned above, and we have common tasks, then such a person becomes close to me. I stop communicating with a person if I find out that he lied to me, if he was hypocritical or tried to harm me in any way. For example, if he divulged information that was intended only for him. Of course, there must be a convincing evidence for this. In addition, I can stop with a person if he suddenly turns out to be a communist. That's a joke. Question 16. Tell us about 1-3 famous or outstanding people you like. You can cite modern, historical figures or fictional characters. Explain your choice. Do you have anything in common with these people? There are many outstanding people that I like. I like all people who live and act in their own way, do not follow the crowd, and thus achieve impressive results. The first one is Maynard James Keenan. He is a vocalist of Tool band. He's very talented, purposeful. His musical projects are commercially successful. He creates beautiful and bright music. He performs all over the world and makes grapevine at his leisure. And he's a very funny person. The second one will be Pyotr Stolypin, who was one of the last prime ministers of Russian Empire. Stolypin was a hard-working patriot of his motherland, and he really tried to do his best to carry out the necessary reforms to strengthen Russia. He was the one who could prevent the October Revolution, but unfortunately he did not have time to do everything that was necessary. He was assassinated by a left-wing radical psychopath in 1911. That's why I don't like any lefty ideologies. And the third person will be Jordan Peterson. It's a Canadian professor. I came across his activity recently and I liked his lectures very much because his ideas are very close to my thoughts. And he's very hardworking. He is very unusual and very purposeful person, I think. Do I have anything in common with these people? I can't say definitely. I'm not a musician, though I have some experience in performing on stage. I just live with my personal understanding of what shall be done. What concerns Pyotr Stolypin, I'm not a Democrat, just like him, as you have already noticed. I don't believe in liberty, equality, fraternity, and I am quite skeptical of the idea of universal suffrage. In general, I don't think that the opinion of any random person with an unknown level of intelligence and education should be taken into account when choosing the president of the country. Question 17. If you were a mayor of your city, what would you do first in this position? What changes would you make to the city? My city is Kaliningrad. It is being managed quite okay. We have a young governor here, and he started solving long-standing problems with empty spaces and buildings that remained unfinished since USSR collapsed. Our city has a layout from the beginning of 20th century, and it was not designed for such a huge quantity of automobiles. So I would try to solve the transport problem, to encourage people to use public transport and decrease the quantity of traffic. The implementation of new transport systems would have solved the problem, I think. Question 18. Tell us about the country in which you would like to live. Explain your choice. What do you like and dislike in country of your residence? I moved from Belarus to Russia 10 years ago, and I'm very happy about that, because it would be difficult for me to live in a country which government I cannot respect. I consider myself a Russian person by culture, so I am most comfortable living here. Russian mentality mostly suits me, and I can hardly imagine myself as a resident of left liberal countries like modern Germany or, for example, Sweden. I like that Russia is conducting an independent international policy. We have enough resources to survive difficult times. Russia has good medicine. We have one of the best weapons in the world, so it is really safe to live in Russia. We have the largest country in the world with beautiful nature. We have almost all climate zones, from far north to the taiga forests, oceans, south seas and mountains. You can choose a region to your liking. The cost of housing and taxes in Russia are relatively low, so our country is in fact one of the most attractive to live in if you do not pray for Western-style democracy. There are, of course, disadvantages in Russia. We do not have a very effective state administration in the regions and too conservative society in several issues, but I feel okay about that. Question 19. For each of these pictures, give detailed statements, thoughts. What do you see in the picture? What, in your opinion, is the main idea of the author? The first picture shows a melancholy girl in a formal dress against a background of brown clouds. The picture creates a sense of alarm because the clouds seem to thicken, as before a thunderstorm. Perhaps the artist wanted to show that this girl is waiting for some difficulties in her life. The second picture shows the disaster in the city of Pompeii. People here are depicted in unnatural theatrical poses. They, for some reason, look around in fear in the wrong direction from which the threat comes. There is a simultaneous eruption of a volcano, and lightning strikes the statues. And the guy downstairs seems to ask the woman if she turned off the iron, and she says, "Yes, it's all right, run." The artist wanted to depict how the tragedy in Pompeii may have happened, but I think this picture is not very realistic. It's too theatrical. In the third picture, 3 hunters are resting in a field. This most likely happens in the fall. The characters, their facial expressions and clothing are drawn in great detail, while the landscape, on the contrary, is depicted in much less detail. The hunter on the left tells a creepy story. The young man on the right is imbued with the story, and the hunter in the middle is ironic, just a household scene from 19th century. Picture 4. A couple in love flying on the bench between planes. In my opinion, the man on the left is not particularly interested in the girl, and the girl turned her back on him, as if she is offended by him. At the same time, the picture is drawn in pleasant, soothing colors. I have a very strange impression on this picture. The author wanted to convey something about their relationship, perhaps that if you are flying on a bench in the stratosphere, then hold on to each other at least. Picture 5 shows ships from 18th or 19th century that were caught in a storm. Many people who describe this picture for some reason say that this picture is a naval battle, but I don't see guns and shots here. Rather, it is a group of merchant ships that were unlucky with the weather. One ship has already sunk. The painting has a very pleasant color scheme. Water and clouds are depicted in thick and rich colors. Picture number 6 shows a black entity that is rapidly crawling up the stairs of an old house. It could be a curse or an evil spirit. I think the picture was drawn in watercolor and pencil. Picture number 7. By the way, this picture was painted by the creator of the theory of psychological types, Carl Gustav Jung. The picture shows a metaphorical tree with a very strange pattern on the bark. In the branches of the tree there is an energy ball which is flying, which radiates some energy. I hope it's not a radioactive. Perhaps this picture describes one of the most archetypal dreams that Carl Gustav Jung often had. Picture number 8 shows Judas. He is both sorry for what he did and he is looking forward to what will happen next. The picture is deliberately painted in dirty black colors to emphasize the vile act that Judas committed. Picture number 9 depicts a secular society in 19th century Russia. Here there are two men which look similar to Chekhov. The general impression is that everyone here is very bored. The guy in the center is reading something, but everyone listens to him out of politeness. Some of them are almost asleep. The interior of the house is very rich and made in pleasant colors. Picture number 10, we see a council of ravens making a decision on some important issue. It looks like an episode from some mystical Gothic movie. In the background, the wind blows and you can see some kind of curtain. The crows have a very solemn look. In picture 11, we see three girls from 19th century noble family. I think they are related to each other, perhaps they are sisters or cousins. Since there was no feminism or the internet on that time, I can assume with high probability that they read some kind of romance novels and dream of getting married. In picture 12, we see an allusion to consciousness and subconsciousness, which are connected by a metaphorical ladder. The author of the picture may have wanted to portray his impressions of Freud theory. Downstairs we see a pleasant forest landscape with the warm air, and in the top we see rainy and cold weather. Very unpleasant weather. In picture 13, a woman in an empty and cold room is waiting for someone at the window. Perhaps this is a music teacher and this is a music class and she's waiting for a student. Either she has a break between classes and she smokes in the window. Picture 14. We see the final scene from a Lovecraft-style horror movie. The main character with a torch goes through a deadly giants. He seems to be on the way to the main boss. And these are the guards. The picture is made in blood orange tones and shows how far you can go if you are the main character of horror movie. So the final question, where it is. Tell us about your own version of your socionic type and what versions were given to you by other socionists or tests. Since I'm practicing and studying socionics quite for a long time, since 2006, for 14 years already, I had many versions of my type from other people, but mine version is logical sensory introvert. So I'm looking forward to your comments and maybe you suggest some other versions. Thank you for your attention and subscribe to our channel to see more interesting videos on socionics and psychosophy. Bye bye.